Topic for my today's CME is dysmenorrhea and chronic pelvic pain. This is a very, very common problem, and 8% of females who are either working or they are going to universities or educational institutes, they will not attend. So they'll be absent from work every month for a few days, and this is like a problem which should be solved. Sometimes it's intractable, like the headache. So sometimes there's no cause. In fact, most of the time there is no cause for this. Dysmenorrhea, the definition, types, causes and management. Definition of dysmenorrhea is painful menstruation, and in Greek it means difficult monthly flow. Dysmenorrhea causes cramping in the lower abdomen, radiating to the back and legs, often accompanied by gastrointestinal, neurological symptoms as well as general malaise. And it's very common for these ladies to have general malaise. They'll feel weak, fatigued, they have pain, they don't feel like working, and they'll be absent from work. The types. There are two types of dysmenorrhea. Primary dysmenorrhea, which is idiopathic. Usually there is no cause found. We do ultrasounds, we do everything, even on MRI, nothing is found. So primary dysmenorrhea is the main type, but secondary dysmenorrhea, usually there is a pathological cause for it. And when you do an ultrasound, you can identify the pathology in that. Primary dysmenorrhea is usually due to uterine hypercontractility and uterine vasospasm. And the patient will have a lot of pain, especially as soon as her cycle starts. She'll complain of pain, which is radiating to the legs, to the back, and she's very uncomfortable. She might be having a headache also associated with it. So what is the cause of this primary dysmenorrhea? The cause is usually endothelins, prostaglandins F2 alpha and E2, vasopressin, noradrenaline, oxytocin, and it could be a neurological reason because there is relief after destruction of cervical and myometrial nerve endings at childbirth. So mostly the cause is usually due to prostaglandins, and that is why, since the cause is prostaglandin, when you give non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, the patient will respond to it. But then the flow of the blood during the menstrual cycle will reduce. Secondary dysmenorrhea has many causes, and we must look into those causes. Intrauterine causes are fibroids, intrauterine contraceptive device, polyp, Asherman syndrome, adenomyosis, PID, and a retroverted uterus. So if we could discuss one by one, fibroids, especially if they are submucous fibroids, they will lead to dysmenorrhea, and even subserous, if they are pedunculated and they are very mobile, they can lead to a secondary dysmenorrhea. Intrauterine contraceptive device, every time the patient has a menstrual cycle, because of the uterine spasm, the intrauterine contraceptive device tries to be expelled and leads to pain in the patient. Polyps are, you all know, they are pedunculated tumors which are inside the cavity of the uterus and inside the cavity of the cervix, and they will lead to pain and severe dysmenorrhea at the time of the menstrual cycle. Asherman syndrome is caused due to overstimulation, over-curettage of the uterine cavity, and due to adhesions which are formed between the anterior and posterior wall of the uterus. This can also lead to dysmenorrhea. Adenomyosis is a condition in which there is hypertrophy of the muscles of the uterus, usually after 2 or 3 children have been born, and the size of the uterus increases, and it is like endometriosis, and some of the blood of the menstruation, it falls between the muscles of the uterus, and this is what adenomyosis is. And especially during the menstrual cycle, these patients will have severe dysmenorrhea, and there's a reason for this dysmenorrhea. Then comes PID. PID is pelvic inflammatory disease. This is caused by various organisms such as Neisseria gonorrhea, even tuberculosis, chlamydia, and the infection, it leads to this chronic inflammation, and every time the patient has a menstrual cycle, she will have severe pain. And last is the retroverted uterus. 15% of females have a retroverted uterus, and that leads to severe dysmenorrhea during the cycle. Extrauterine causes which lead to secondary dysmenorrhea are endometriosis, adhesions due to PID, previous surgery, residual ovary syndrome. Endometriosis is a condition in which there is menstruation inside from extrauterine tissues, and usually endometriosis is present in the ovaries, and every time the patient has a cycle, there is bleeding inside the pelvic cavity, and this bleeding, obviously there's tension in the tissues of the ovary and the surrounding structures, sometimes the uterosacral ligaments, and that leads to severe pain during the menstrual cycle, and the patient is incapacitated. And the main symptom of endometriosis is severe dysmenorrhea. Adenomyosis and endometriosis are related because adenomyosis is endometriosis which occurs inside the uterine muscle planes. Then adhesions due to PID, pelvic inflammatory disease. These adhesions are caused by chronic infections. The tissues, they adhere to each other, and sometimes there's a frozen pelvis. The fallopian tubes, the ovary, the broad ligament, and the tissues in the pelvis, they all adhere to each other. They are dense adhesions, and every time the patient has a cycle, and because of vasospasm, the patient will have severe pain. Previous surgery, the same reason, there'll be adhesions leading to pain. For example, patient had an appendectomy done, appendix removed as a child, and then when she grows up and she starts having her cycles, this girl will have severe dysmenorrhea every time she has a cycle. Then residual ovarian syndrome. This is an interesting entity. In this condition, you remove the ovaries at the time of hysterectomy, and some part of the ovaries are left behind. Due to some reason, due to adhesions or whatever, part of the ovary is removed, and some parts of the ovary are left behind, and they lead to severe pain. Even if the patient doesn't have a menstrual cycle because the uterus has been removed, she will still have pain whenever at the time of her withdrawal of hormones, because the ovary is producing those hormones, and there's a cycle going on, and she will have pain every time whenever she has that date. So sometimes the patients are right after hysterectomy when they tell you that every month they have a pain, and that is usually because of the pieces, small fragments of ovary which are left behind. Then outflow obstruction. This happens in patients who have Mullerian duct abnormalities or have cervical stenosis. What happens in these patients is, for example, in those who have an imperforate hymen, the patient complains of severe lower abdominal pain every month without any menstruation. And when you examine her, she will have a mass in the lower abdomen because the menstruation which is taking place cannot be relieved out of the system because the hymen is closed, and all the blood which is produced due to menstruation is collected in the pelvis. So there is outflow tract obstruction, and sometimes what happens is everything else is normal and the cervix is stenosed. So there is a menstrual cycle, there is menstruation, and the blood cannot come out and cannot flow out. So it keeps collecting in the uterus, backflows to the fallopian tubes, into the pelvic cavity, and hence into the abdomen, and leads to severe pain. So then how do you manage dysmenorrhea? The management of dysmenorrhea depends on whether it is primary or secondary dysmenorrhea, and if there is a cause which can be removed, you can do that, and the dysmenorrhea will most probably be gone. In primary dysmenorrhea, since you cannot actually find a cause, you have to take a history that it starts 6 to 12 months after menarche when ovulatory cycles are established. So primary dysmenorrhea is related to ovulation. So if you stop the ovulation, the dysmenorrhea will stop. This is just common sense, okay? Just prior or during menstruation and lasts for the duration of flow only. The patient complains that the dysmenorrhea is most severe on the first day and becomes lesser and lesser as the cycle goes on. And this is a diagnosis of exclusion. 72% of patients are 19-year-old because this is the time when there's maximum ovulation, and these patients will complain, and especially they haven't had children. So this is the maximum time when they will have primary dysmenorrhea. 40% will regularly use medication and 8% stay absent from school or work because of this dysmenorrhea. So you have to take a detailed history. The history will tell you whether it is primary dysmenorrhea or secondary dysmenorrhea. You have to examine the patient to rule out any masses or any physical cause of the dysmenorrhea, and once you find a physical cause, then it is not primary. They actually pick it up by, even with MRI you can't pick it up, even ultrasound will not pick it. So only laparoscopy will tell you that there is congestion. So that's called a pelvic congestion syndrome. You can't, there's no actual physical problem, but the vessels are very hyperemic and the area is very red. So medical treatment. What medical treatment should you give? Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory are the drug of choice. Then if the patient does not respond to NSAIDs, you can start the patient off on combined oral contraceptive pill. But combined oral contraceptive pill will only work if the patient has ovulatory cycles. If there are anovulatory cycles, then COCs do not work. So you have to first confirm that the patient is having ovulatory cycles. And if you put her on the contraceptive pill, since contraceptive pills, they stop ovulation at the hypothalamic level, therefore the patient will stop having dysmenorrhea. Then other hormonal methods include, you can put them on a progesterone pill only, a cyclical pill, and they will also respond to this because progesterones, less or decrease the contractions of the uterus and reduce the spasm, and therefore these patients will respond by progesterones also. Other methods, these include like evening primrose oil. They have been tried for many decades. There is no strong evidence that giving evening primrose oil stops dysmenorrhea, but maybe the patient has a placebo effect and therefore her pain will be reduced. You can also give, in non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, you can give mefenamic acid, COX inhibitors, naproxen, ibuprofen and aspirin. Ibuprofen is preferred because it has safety and efficacy. You should commence the treatment at the start of the menstruation. Once the pain cycle starts, you cannot break it even if you give non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. So the treatment should be started as soon as the cycle starts, even if the dysmenorrhea is not present. Give drugs which have a short plasma half-life, and make sure that the patient is not pregnant, because all these drugs are contraindicated during pregnancy. The only problem with NSAIDs is that the blood flow during the menstrual cycle is reduced, and then the patient will start complaining that she's had a very scanty menstruation. So you have to counsel them before giving NSAIDs that this problem will occur. So you can give combined oral contraceptive pill, as I told you. It inhibits ovulation and decreases endometrial production of prostaglandins and leukotrienes by inducing endometrial atrophy. So COCs act at the level of the hypothalamus by reducing ovulation, and locally by reducing the prostaglandins and leukotrienes. So it's a good treatment modality for those patients who are not responding to NSAIDs. Other treatments which you can give are LNG-IUS, which is a levonorgestrel intrauterine system, because it releases slow release of progesterone at the rate of 20 micrograms every month, and that thins out the endometrial lining, and plus reduces the contractions of the uterus therefore reducing the vasospasm in the uterus, and helps in treating the primary dysmenorrhea. Then depo-progesterones, which include injections. For example, the injection of Depo-Provera, which is for 3 months. You give hydroxyprogesterone to the patient, and her contractions in the uterus are stopped, and therefore she will not have dysmenorrhea. Then progesterone only pill can also be given, which is 75 micrograms of desogestrel. It inhibits ovulation and therefore reduces dysmenorrhea. Then other drugs which can be used and which we usually are less commonly used are beta-adrenergic agonists, calcium channel blockers, transdermal glyceryl trinitrate. All of these have been time tested, but results, if the patient is not responding to other treatment, only then we can use them as not as primary agent but as secondary agents. And other treatments which can be used are vitamin E, omega-3. Omega-3, there's a lot of talk going on about omega-3, and these days even calcium preparations are present in the market which have omega-3 in them. So, and separately also you can get it. So sometimes it can act as a placebo, probably because research has not proven that omega-3 is a very effective agent in dysmenorrhea. Secondary dysmenorrhea. So you diagnose secondary dysmenorrhea from the history. The patient will tell you that the pain increases as the cycle goes on. The pain is least on the first day and increases as the cycle goes on. And usually the patient is around 30 to 45 years. And her increase of, as the menstrual cycle goes on, the pain also increases. Then you can do a clinical examination. You can do an ultrasound. Microbial cultures can be done from the endocervix and peritoneal fluid if you are suspecting pelvic inflammatory disease. And the final diagnosis can be with a laparoscopy because it diagnoses endometriosis, adenomyosis, and it also is the gold standard to diagnose pelvic inflammatory disease. Then you can also do a hysterosalpingography to diagnose congenital abnormalities of the uterus, such as uterus diadelphys, which also leads to secondary dysmenorrhea. And then you can do a hysteroscopy, which helps you to diagnose polyps. Polyps, I told you, can lead to dysmenorrhea. So that can be done also. Treatment is directed at correction of the cause. If there is pelvic inflammatory disease, you have to give a long-term antibiotic. You can do adhesiolysis with a laparoscope. Then you can do pain management by giving analgesics. Then in intractable cases, such as those with adenomyosis and endometriosis, and if the family is complete, you can go for a hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy, because unless you remove the ovaries, the pain will not be gone, because otherwise endometriosis will persist. Then chronic causes of, one part of the pain was dysmenorrhea, the other part of the pain is chronic pelvic pain. Many patients come to us and all the time they are complaining of pain, and these are chronic patients who come every 10 to 15 days and they keep coming to you for years. And they have chronic pelvic pain, so we should try to take a detailed history, find out what is the reason of the chronic pelvic pain, what is the etiology, assess the type of pain they have and what is the reason. Then you can investigate also and discuss the therapeutic options. This is chronic pelvic pain is intermittent or constant pain in the lower abdomen or pelvis of at least 6 months duration, not occurring exclusively with menstruation or intercourse and not associated with pregnancy. So these patients, they keep complaining of pain. It has nothing to do with the cycle and nothing to do with the menstruation. They are all the time complaining of pain, and this pain has been persisting for the last or previous 6 months, and then you label them as having chronic pelvic pain. The prevalence rate of chronic pelvic pain is comparable to those for migraine, backache and asthma for a primary care physician. Causes of chronic pelvic pain, gynecological are 20%, musculoskeletal, psychological, gastrointestinal up to 30%, urological up to 31%. So you have to rule out. This is a Diagnosis of exclusion, you have to find out what is the reason why the patient is having this problem. There is frequently more than one component. Assessment should aim to identify the contributory factors and assign cause to a single pathology only. So causes of gynecological causes are inflammatory, infective, inflammatory, non-infective, mechanical, functional, neuropathic, and musculoskeletal. These are gynecological causes. As I told you, sometimes there is just inflammation, or you do a laparoscopy and you find that there is inflammation of the pelvic areas without actually having a mass in the ovary or in the uterus or a tumor in the uterus, okay? So, in gynecological causes, I've already told you, inflammatory, infective, then endometriosis, vulvodynia with dermatosis. Mechanical causes can be due to uterine retroversion, adhesions. They can be functional causes, pelvic congestion and irritable bowel syndrome, which can also then residual ovary syndrome, trapped ovary syndrome, the ovaries trapped in adhesions secondary to endometriosis. Then neuropathic causes can be due post-surgical, dysesthesia, vulvodynia, vulval vestibulodynia. These are very, very rare conditions, but they are present and patient will have, if when you can't find anything, then you label them as vulvodynia. Pelvic floor myalgia, abdominal and pelvic trigger points, and postural muscle strains. Then depression, sleep disorders can also lead to chronic pelvic pain, sexual and physical abuse, and child sexual abuse also lead to pelvic pain. Then gastrointestinal causes are irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, diverticular disease, carcinoma of the colon and rectum, endometriosis. Endometriosis also affects the intestines, that's why it's added here also, because intestines may be affected by endometriosis and lead to pain. Chronic urethral syndrome and neurological causes, chronic cystitis and radiation cystitis. You know, interstitial cystitis is a bad disease to have because the urine examination which you do doesn't show any infection, no pus cells, nothing is grown on the culture. It's just that the infection is in the walls of the bladder and it's difficult to treat. Although recently Botox treatment has been used, Botox has been injected. Just like in headache, Botox is given, it is given in interstitial cystitis also, it is injected into the bladder and leads to pain relief in these cases. So management of allow the patient to tell her story, directed question, pain diary, vaginal examination, identify any specific aims and fears, especially in those who have a sexual abuse. Then STI screening is very important, sexually transmitted infections. Recent change of partners, this is obviously for the West, but can happen here also. Symptoms suggestive of PID, she's previously had chronic infections, maybe history of tuberculosis in Pakistan. Tuberculosis is very common, but that would not be STI. STI would be gonorrhea or chlamydia. We don't have tests for chlamydia, but we do have tests for gonorrhea and other gram-positive and gram-negative infections. So we can take a urethral swab and decide what type of an infection she has. Abnormal findings on vaginal examination, consider diagnostic laparoscopy or a scan depending how bad the findings are. No abnormality on examination, then suspect endometriosis. You can give a trial of oral contraceptive pill, GnRH analogs, progestogens, danazol or analgesia. If there's no response in 3 to 6 months, do a laparoscopy to confirm. One thing which I would like to tell you is about radiological embolization of pelvic varices. I told you there is pelvic congestion syndrome which doesn't respond to any medicine. Koi surgery bhi aisi nahi hai jo hum kar sakein. So in those cases you can do a embolization of these pelvic vessels through the through the pelvic blood vessels to the only this can only be done by a radiologist who is trained to do it. Interventional radiologists can do that. Symptoms suggestive of irritable bowel syndrome, obviously you have to give high fiber diet, you have to give mebeverine and smooth muscle relaxants, then you have to exclude certain diets such as dairy products and grains. The urogenital symptoms, you have to refer to urology or gastroenterology for the treatment. Sometimes there's a marked psychological component, so you can start in analgesia and refer to a specialist who can help them with the psychological problems. Pain management team, specialist in pelvic pain, their clinics. Brigadier Salim will tell you more about this. But as far as we are concerned, we can give NSAIDs and give cordidermol, neuropathic pain, amitriptyline, static magnetic therapy, and TENS, which is transcutaneous nerve stimulation, can be used. This was also used for the headache, so we use it for the pelvic pain also. So summary is that multidisciplinary management is sometimes needed. You can give medical therapy, sometimes surgical therapy can be used, just such as adhesiolysis, static magnetic therapy, photographic enforcement, and writing therapies. Okay, thank you so much.